Okay, so welcome back. So we're going to do a little bit of revision. As I said, your test is on Friday. Whoops, I don't know what's going on there. So this Friday, and it's on the nervous system. Something is not right. Nervous system, so that's up to the end of page 11 in your notes booklet. So let's do a little bit of revision then. So, I'm drawing a very rough diagram of something. Okay, what is this that I've sketched? A neuron, okay. So the proper term is a neuron. I really don't know what's going on here. Hold on. Okay, folks, listen. It'd be a good idea if you had a piece of paper and just wanted to jot down a few things. I'm revising this to help you. If you need paper, there's paper in one of the things at the side there. Gabrielle, can you maybe find a file block or something for paper? So if anybody else needs paper, Gabrielle, give it to you.
Gabrielle.
Okay, I've just drawn a very dodgy person. What is your central nervous system?
Your brain.
Your brain, and so your brain is up there. Your spinal cord comes out of your brain, and it's a very fine extension of your brain. Okay, so it contains nervous tissue. So that is your central nervous system, and you have a whole series of neurons that are attached to your central nervous system. So if you think about the longest neuron has to go from your toe right up your leg to your spinal cord. And obviously there'll be one coming in the other direction as well, taking messages from your central nervous system down to move your big toe or your wee toe or whatever. So those are called neurons. Neurons therefore have to be very long so that they can reach all the parts of your body. Okay, so they're very long and very thin. That diagram isn't drawn to scale. So you think of that neuron I'm talking about that goes to your big toe, it's almost a metre in length in some people. Maybe about 60 centimetres in me, so maybe about that length there. And the cell body would be about the size of the top of a pin. So this part here is called the cell body. Okay. I don't know what is wrong with this silly iPad. So cell body. And this bit here, the long bit, is called the axon. And it is really long. So I said that's not drawn to scale. It'd be much, much longer than that. So the impulse can only travel in one direction. It's like a one-way street. But also, these neurons have to be able to communicate with all parts of your body. So they need to have be able to communicate with lots of other neurons, and to enable that to happen, they're branched endings here at the end, so that they can connect with different neurons. Okay, so they're branched, long, so that they can carry messages throughout the body. They're branched, and you can see they're branched at both ends. And that's so that they can send messages and communicate to lots of other neurons, okay? There's one other important thing. And this long axon, really, really long, it's actually covered in a special fatty substance. Yeah, it's called a sheath, a myelin sheath. Anybody remember why neurons need to have that? Oh, great, thank you. Anybody remember why neurons have that? What does it do?
Insulation.
Okay, so it insulates it, and what does that enable to happen then?
Speeds it up.
Speeds up the impulse, yep. So a neuron carries information in the form of electrical impulse. That's the message as such, and it will travel in this direction here. The myelin sheath speeds up the impulse. Have you heard of polio?
Yeah.
Yes. I'm sure you don't know anybody that has polio.
No.
No, because basically we've eradicated it in the UK and basically Europe. When you were born, most, if not all, babies get a vaccination against polio. And unfortunately for the baby, it's not an injection. It's one of the few vaccines you can just take on your mouth. You can swallow. And so probably when you were a baby, you got some injections in your arm, but the nurse also just put a couple of drops of the vaccine on your tongue and you swallowed it. And so you became immune to polio. Polio was a disease, if you'd been born 100 years ago, yeah, you probably would have known somebody that had polio, because it was pretty common. And it actually, polio affects, the full name is poliomyelitis, and it breaks down this myelin sheath. So it attacks the myelin, and so it breaks down the sheath. And that meant that the impulses weren't able to travel. If that happened in like a motor neuron going to your muscle, say this one here in your leg, if it happened there and it damaged the myelin sheath, that person wouldn't be able to use their leg, because or they would have very little control over their leg, because the impulse is going so slowly that it really wasn't getting there. So the myelin sheath is to speed up the impulse. Okay? So that's the structure of neurons. We mentioned the central nervous system there. And I said that neurons carry information to the central nervous system, and we call that the coordinator. Whoops. So let's take another page here. Your spine, I'll just pause here. Okay, so I'll get the projector back on again. Your brain, and this diagram, this is like a sideways diagram of somebody, and their brain would be up there. So at the base of their brain stem, then a little small bit comes through. So the spinal cord is, I'll just show you the spinal cord, it's that pink bit down through the middle there. And it's surrounded by your spine. Your spine is made up of 30 odd vertebrae. and each vertebrae is sort of that shape there, okay? And the vertebrae, the bone, is there to protect your spinal cord, because obviously it contains lots of neurons, and it's very sensitive, and it needs to be protected. Now, this bit here, basically they've just take a little section and they've made it bigger and they're looking at it. So, have you heard of, you have discs in your back? Have you heard of somebody maybe slipping a disc or damaging a disc or things like that? In between the bones, if the bones were just sitting on top of each other, whenever you move, they would be rubbing against each other, and the friction would cause them to to damage, and it would be sore. And so you've actually got like a little cushiony pad thing in between. That's made of cartilage. Cartilage is the stuff in your ears, okay? So it gives support, but it's flexible. And so in between your bones, the vertebrae, you've got a cartilage disc, which really is there to cushion. All right, so that your back, the bones can move and not be rubbing against each other. So that's what the disc is there. And it's in between the vertebrae. So underneath that, we've got the vertebrae, the bone. So the bone would be all round there and round there and round there. And then in the middle, this is the spinal cord here, and it's going down through there and down, okay? So it's in a little hole in the middle protected by the bone. Now, the diagram underneath, if I get rid of all my scribbling, okay, diagram underneath shows you the spinal cord. So this bit here is the spinal cord. And you'll see in the middle, we've got this grey matter, and that's what it's called, grey matter. And then the stuff around it is white. And you can see there's two sort of entries in or out. So there's one going in, and there's another sort of like tube coming out. And the same on the other side, one coming in, one coming out. So when we, look at this is the view from above. So all this material here, that's all bone. Okay? And then in the middle here, this is the spinal cord. And we've got the nerves. A nerve is just a bundle of neurons coming in and then coming out. And the same on the other side. So obviously one is nerves coming from one side of your body, the other is coming from the other side of your body. Okay. Suppose we'll think about neurons. So neurons, we said that earlier on, stimulus. So say, for example, you hear the bell. So what's the sensory organ? What's the sensory organ?
What?
If you hear the bell.
You're happy.
What is the sensory organ?
Ears.
The ears, okay. So there will be receptor cells. Matthew, you always happy when you hear the bell to go to biology? You were thinking of lunchtime, weren't you?
Yeah.
Okay, so receptors in the ear will stimulate and they will send an impulse down a neuron. Now, that is called the sensory neuron. Okay? So that's called the sensory neuron. We'll come back to that in a moment. That travels into the central nervous system. So if it was your eye, it would actually go to your brain. But if it was anywhere else in your body apart from your head, it goes to your spinal cord. And usually then that information is taken up through the spinal cord to your brain. And you decide, okay, it's lunchtime. I'm going to get up, I'm going to rush to the dining hall. Or, oh, it's the end of lunch, it's biology again. Great. Matthew jumps up and runs to H10. So, it may go to your brain. You may think about it. And then message comes back out to your spinal cord and it goes to another neuron. Shh. that takes the message, in this case, down to the muscles in your arms and legs, and you run to biology class. Now, so we talked about receptors in the ear. The muscles in your arms and your legs, they are effectors. Do you remember that? Yep, so that's the effector. What is the name of the neuron that takes the message to the muscle? Begins with M. Motor neuron, good. So yeah, somebody said motor neuron disease. Motor neuron disease is a really horrible disease. It affects the motor neurons. So if it damages the motor neurons, that means that the person eventually will start to lose, well, the messages aren't getting to their muscles properly, and so they're not able to control their movement very well. And it's a horrible disease. Yeah?
Is cirrhosis to do with?
There's different types of cirrhosis. Like there's liver cirrhosis and so on. So I'm not sure. Joshua, could you get this up over your nose and your mouth? That's better. Okay. Right. So sensory neuron. Obviously, you're sensing the stimulus. So S for sensory, S for stimulus. Motor, M for muscle, M for movement. But in the spinal cord, there's another neuron that can link those two together. What's it called? Association neuron. Okay. So that example there, think of that where you hear it. Sensory neuron takes it to your spinal cord. Association neuron passes it on to the motor neuron. Takes the message to the muscle. That's very quick. But we said in this example here where you hear the bell, the message has to go to your brain. Sam, could you listen there? Harry as well. It has to go to your brain, so it takes time to get the message to your brain for you to think, oh, I'm going to jump up, I'm going to run to class. And then it takes a while to get the message back down your spinal cord. So that kind of voluntary action was a voluntary action where you make a conscious decision, you consciously think. So there's conscious thought going on, that's the term we use. And your brain is obviously involved. All right. What's the other type of action we looked at? Where there's you don't think about it, it happens automatically. Reflex. So reflex action, it happens automatically, and that means there is no conscious thought. And the brain isn't involved. Now, if you were, okay, it is fast, but the reflex action doesn't involve your brain, so it is very fast. Now, this diagram here, okay, so what I'm going to do, we're going to draw a few diagrams here in a moment. How am I for time? I'll go and get you a few photocopies here. Wasn't sure how many people would be here. What? 10 past.
Then when do we go back to class?
5 to 2? 5 to, yeah, 5 to 2.
And school ends at 25 past.
Yeah. No, I've got enough actually. You can cancel whatever that is. Whoa! Okay, so the top you're going to write reflex arc, ARC. Okay, so in this case, the person has touched, they've gone to grab a plate, but the plate's just come out of the oven or has been sitting on something hot. It's roasting. So they've got receptors in their skin that detect that stimulus, the hot temperature, and that sends an impulse up this neuron. What is this neuron called? Sensory neuron. So it goes the whole way up and just into there. So you're going to put an arrow and you're going to label that in that colour as the sensory neuron. Boys, can we get this done? Okay, so put a couple of arrows just so you remember what direction it's going. What's the next neuron called? Association neuron. So it doesn't touch it. It's just a very short one. Just goes like that. And then there's going to be the motor neuron, which comes out of the bottom, down through there, and out to the muscle. Okay, so the first one sensory, second one association, third one motor. What do we call the gap between the neurons? Synapse. So I'm going to add that in. I'm going to put a little circle there. Put a little circle there. SYNAPSE. Somehow it got rubbed out a little bit there. Okay, so remember the order, eh? Order, sensory, association, and motor neuron. And the way I remember that is I think of Sam. All right, Sam, you're popular. S-A-M. Okay, so take 2 minutes and answer these questions, alright? Will you sing the voice tonight? No. Okay.
I'm sorry, I'm taking you down.
Do you have to eat at different times sometimes? Yeah.
That's the second year in a row we've done walking out. I love the clubs that are brilliant. Storms are on either. The last Saturday we filmed. I'm dying at this now.
So I'm just giving you out the learning intelligence for the hormones section now. That's not on your test, but obviously you've got some notes and stuff on it, and we'll finish it off pretty soon as well. Folks, we have made good progress. I mean, the vast majority of you have worked very hard, and we're a little bit ahead of where we'd normally be at this time of the year, I suppose, because we haven't been able to do practical and so on, but certainly it's not a case of having to catch up or we're not behind, so I'm very pleased with our progress, and that allows us to, I mean, you are going to have exams in June, but it allows us to do a bit of revision and so on, and so the things that we did during remote learning, okay, we had some live lessons and I was able to go over some things, but if there's anything else, there will be a chance, you know, whenever it comes to revision, if there's anything you're not sure about, or over the next few days, if there's something that you remember that you need explained or you want a wee bit more explanation of. Right, answers, and then we'll go for our lunch. Okay, so parts A, B, and C. A. Clara, what's that? A bit louder? Sensory. Neuron, yep. Zoe, what's B? Motor neuron. And C? Anybody? Association neuron. Use the information in the diagram to help explain why reflex arc provides a very fast response. You could say there's only 3 neurons involved, or it's a very short distance, but there's 2 marks, so what else do you think you need to say?
Doesn't need the brain.
Yeah, the brain isn't involved, or there's no thinking time needed. Right, I will see you after lunch.